Barbara Bush quote. Fantastic. Um, so the other day, I was hanging out with my nephew, and he was going through iTunes, playing some music and stuff. And of course, one of my favorite songs come on, Can't Touch This by MC Hammer. He's like, oh, can I please get this? It's only $1 on iTunes. And of course, I said, well, first thing I thought of was parachute pants and gold necklaces. And after that, I realized, you know what? This is one of those when I was your age moments. My uncle took me to the record store and bought me the cassette for $15. Amazing how just in one generation, the power has shifted from the music industry to the consumers. What happened? Well, the decentralized information system we know as the internet happened. Back when MC Hammer was too legit to quit, and Vanilla Ice was cooking MCs like a pound of bacon, there was only 4 major record labels. And they controlled everything. They controlled the distribution of music. So they got to decide who was heard, which artists were heard, and they got to set the pricing for all the music we bought. And then what happens? Well, the internet happens, and anybody remember Napster? Yeah, that was a crazy time. All of a sudden, the consumers had the power. We can now share music amongst each other. What do we need the record labels for? Now, granted, Napster was illegal, and the musicians were not getting their proper royalties, but the power shifted, and it forced the record industry to have to adapt. So what did they do? Well, Apple came out with the iPod, and now you could buy a song for $1 instead of having to buy the whole record. And you didn't have it on these like CDs or, flimsy cassettes. You had it all on this little device. And then the iPod turned into iTunes and the iPhone. And then we had other technologies like Spotify, Pandora. You could just turn on the internet, listen to internet radio. Sure, they inserted some commercials in between, but it was easy and convenient. And as consumers, we were still going to pay for it. And then even stuff like Kickstarter. This really changed things around where musicians could actually pre-sell their music ahead of making the music. So this way they didn't have to rely on the record labels to raise money to produce their music. They could just go directly to the consumer. So all this stuff happens because of the internet. But the internet didn't just change music. It changed a lot of industries, eh? Let's see here. When's the last time you read from an encyclopedia? When's the last time you developed film and then mailed it to your friend? No, of course, you use Facebook. When's the last time you read the classifieds from a physical newspaper? Anybody recognize this? Yeah, this is one of those tests, who's over 40, who's under 40. It's those phone cards where you scratch it off in the back, and then you can make a long-distance call. What do we need that for now? You can just call your friend over Skype. And of course, I don't know if you guys didn't have this here, but it was all over America. You would go and rent a movie from a Blockbuster, a physical store. We have Netflix. So all of these industries completely got changed overnight by the internet. The same thing is starting to happen now with the blockchain. By the end of this talk, you'll have a pretty good understanding of what it is and how it works. And just like the internet changed decentralized information, the blockchain is going to decentralize trust. Okay, so let's get to it. I just first want to start off, I saw that commercial for like a savings bank, a local regional savings bank. So do we have any bankers in the audience? Oh, wow, quite a few. Okay, so I'm going to pick on you guys throughout. So this will be interesting. Okay, so let's start off 2009. What happens? The financial crisis. A lot of people around the world lost faith, lost trust in the banking world. And as a response, a project was launched. It was called Bitcoin. And Bitcoin was seen as a new hope. And the idea is, can we run a payment system without a centralized authority? Make it a decentralized payment system. So how does it work? Well, for the non-bankers in the room, you got to understand what is a ledger. You log into your online banking, and you see money going in, money going out. And then you have a balance. And it's ever breathing, right? So the next day you come on, you see more transactions. Money going in, money going out. And a new balance. And it just keeps going and going. That's a ledger. Now, in a centralized ledger system, like PayPal, whose ledger do we trust? Who keeps track of that ledger? Well, we trust PayPal, right? They keep track of our money. They decide, do I have $5, $10? Did my transaction go through or not? But in a decentralized payment system, there's 6,000 computers around the world. Whose ledger do we trust? And so this is the key innovation. This is what the blockchain solves. This was the key innovation in Bitcoin. And this is how Bitcoin is different from everything else. It's a decentralized payment system. Okay? And so how does this blockchain work? Well, it's really a process for achieving consensus, because you got 6,000 computers around the world. These people don't know each other, they don't trust each other, and they're managing millions of dollars to process. How does this work? So the way it works is about every 10 minutes, we update the ledger with a new block of transactions. But from the 6,000 computers around the world, which one's going to do it? So we have a competition. Every 10 minutes, a new round of competition starts. And it's kind of like a lottery. The more processing power you put in, the more chance you have of winning. The more lottery tickets you buy, the more chance you have of winning. Okay? And all these guys, they're all called miners. Okay? And so all these miners, they're competing for the right to update the ledger. Okay? And if more than 50% of these miners agree on the new update, then it's put into place. So this is kind of confusing. Let's just kind of run through a round of competition. Okay, so we've got a new round of competition, thousands of computers working really hard to solve this mathematical problem. And finally, one of them says, oh, hey, I got it. I got the right answer. Okay? And they submit a new block of transactions to the ledger. Okay, cool. So now every other computer around the world takes a look at this and verifies, yes, you did get the right answer. And all the transactions you put in the list, we agree with. They are all authentic, and they are all real. So now, more than 50% of the computers around the world update the ledger. Okay, so that's, kind of out of the box, kind of crazy. But as nice as it is for me to explain it to you, let's see it live. Let's see some real money. If you go to blockchain.info, this is on the internet. You can even look on your phone right now. This is real money running through the Bitcoin's blockchain right now. So about 18 minutes ago, on that block right there, there's about 2,200 transactions, equaling about $62.6 million. Okay, and you see where it says relay by F2 pool? That's the miner, that's the Bitcoin miner that won the round and put in this block of transactions. Okay, and the reward that it got is actually it's the very first row there. They got about $35,000 for winning that round. Okay, and if we scroll down, you can see these are all the transactions. If we stop it there, just a little bit higher, you see there's one from here to left to right. It's about $126. There's one for $32,000. And this all got processed by 6,000 computers around the world, processed and verified. Anybody remember the ransomware stuff that was in the news last week? Yeah? Anybody got hit by it? No, thankfully not. Well, if you did, we could actually see your transaction. If we scroll, okay, here we go. This is one of the Bitcoin addresses that's receiving the ransomware. So we can actually go on the Bitcoin blockchain and see the transactions that people are paying for their ransom. So here we go. It's one for like $700, $734, $28, $10, $361. In total, I think it was about $30,000 went to this one address. There's like, 20, 50 different Bitcoin addresses that's receiving ransomware money. This is real money. This is happening right now. And in total, there's about $30 billion worth of Bitcoin floating around the world right now. A year ago, that was maybe like $6 billion. Okay, so we'll cut back now to the slides. Okay, so a blockchain is really good at three things. It's really good at being transparent. Like, can we go to PayPal and say, hey, can I see every single transaction since 2009? No, of course not. But with Bitcoin, it's fully transparent. Everybody around the world can see it. It's really good at authentication. You now have 6,000 computers around the world, each of them verifying transactions. So, if there's one bad actor in that group, they're not going to be able to compromise the system. And it's really good at auditing. Now that you know every transaction in there is legitimate, you now have a full audit of every transaction. You don't need to hire an auditor to come and go through everything. So a blockchain is really good at allowing multiple parties to collaborate without having to trust each other. Great. So we got this amazing tool. Who's the first ones to really adopt it? It's the evil empire, the bankers, right? The bankers in the room. Okay, so the empire strikes back, and they've invested a lot of money into this technology. Why? Well, banks, they have lots of partners. They have lots of money moving along each other. And you familiar with the word reconciliation, my banker friends? Yeah? At the end of the day, with every partnership they have to reconcile, because banks have their own databases. They don't trust the other banks' systems and trust them with the money. They want to double check, make sure that we have the right amount of money that went through. So anybody familiar with correspondent banking or sending a wire payment? You ever send that money across to another country and like a week later you're hoping it still gets there? The receiver is like calling you, hey, are you sure you sent it? You call your bank and they're like, yes, we're sure we sent it, but just kind of disappears, and you hope it arrives like a week later or something like that. So this is called correspondent banking, and what really happens is your money does not really go from the sending bank to the receiver bank. It skips along multiple banks along the way, because it's not feasible for every bank to set up a partnership with all 10,000 other banks around the world. So you have this whole crazy network of correspondent banks. And this whole system is really bad at two things. One, speed. Takes a week, takes 2 weeks, I don't know, could take a day. And two, it's very costly. Every bank along the way takes a cut of the money. So what if every bank around the world, instead of using this correspondent banking system, uses a shared ledger, a shared blockchain? Then this way, the money can go across instantly, within seconds. And if any of the banks along the way require liquidity, which is a big problem in the banking world, they now have access to thousands of other banks in the system to get that liquidity. So this isn't like made up stuff. Right now, for the past few years, there's been a lot of trials amongst banks, like trying this out, and they're doing a lot of tests with a handful of different companies building custom blockchains. But for the bankers in the room, are you kind of looking at the Bitcoin blockchain and you're like, what, are you kidding me? Like, we're going to use a system like that and show all our transactions to the world? So one of the innovations that's happened recently is this notion of a private blockchain. They've taken the concept of the Bitcoin blockchain and created another custom blockchain, similar technology, but it's private. And the only people that can have access to this information are the partnering banks. And that whole consensus process that we talked about every 10 minutes is very different now. Now it's more like a voting process. Let's say I want to send $1 from RBC to Santander. So it would be like a 2 out of 3. Of all these 3 banks involved, only 2 of them have to vote yes, and the process gets put through. And this is like how the technology is adapting. And this is how it works for banks. You do another transaction, it goes through. Ripple is one of the leading companies. They've built a custom blockchain system. And this is it happened about in March. They just announced that they're going to be rolling out live a domestic payments network for Japan. 40 different banks are going to be involved in running this domestic payments network. It's going to save them like 5 to 10 times the amount of money in operational costs, and transactions will go through in seconds. But this is, this industry, it's very nascent, but it's adapting very quickly. Cool. So blockchain doesn't really have, there's many other areas that blockchain's applicable in, from like the shoes you're wearing to the medication I'm holding in my hand. I like to take multivitamins once a day, but I'm probably not going to take these ones. Why? Well, I bought them off the guy from the street. It's probably counterfeit, eh? It's probably not safe for me. This is actually a problem in many developing countries. Interpol estimates about 1 million people a year die from counterfeit drugs, just taking the wrong medication. So I, as a consumer, if I go to the store shelf, how do I know the medication I'm buying is legitimate? Well, if we put the entire life story of this medication, from supplier to distributor to manufacturer, everyone along the way, and each person along the way authenticates the transaction, authenticates they are who they say they are, and they have done this to the medication. I, as a consumer, when I go to the store shelf, I have pure confidence that this medication is legitimate and safe for me to take. This is the exact same story if you want to buy clothing. How do I know it's not a knockoff? If I want to buy organic food, how do I know it really came from that farm? So supply chain, that's a big area for blockchain. Distributed asset trading. Anybody ever buy stock in a company? You buy shares. So the process is kind of complicated. Both sides fill out a contract, you have signatures, you take photocopies of the checks. You want to make sure you have a paper trail showing everything. Well, it's okay if you have a very small company and maybe 2 investors. But as a company grows, you're going to pile on more and more investors, and at each transaction, you're going to start hiring auditors, right? Because they're going to go back to the very beginning and say oh, well, did you really give shares to these guys? And they're going to go through all the paperwork, and it just becomes this big nightmare of just lots of auditors. So there's a company that's partnered with NASDAQ, and they've been testing out this concept of purchasing shares in a company through a blockchain. And this is live. There's a few companies that have already done this. And the advantage, as you guys saw, there's multiple computers authenticating the transaction. And what do you need to hire an auditor for? Later on, it's all there. It's all on the blockchain. You have pure confidence that every transaction on that blockchain was authenticated. So that's another area, distributed asset trading. Okay, so of course, with every technology, there's a big downside. This is the biggest downside for sure for blockchain. The tough part is you have to get every party to comply. So, we've had this technology for many years now, so why aren't the banks implementing it yet? Well, sorry, bankers. Try to get a bunch of bankers in a room to decide on what to eat for lunch. You're still going to be waiting till dinner to figure out what you want. There's a lot of there's a lot of differing points of views. There's a lot of bureaucracy that's involved, and things move pretty slow. So this is why right now you're not able to use a blockchain system to move your money. But over time, these things will change and go through. And this is the biggest challenge right now. You have to get every party, along the supply chain, along the wire transfer, to comply to this new system. Okay. Anybody remember Justin Timberlake's boy band? Yeah. Okay. So the song that they sing here, Bye, 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 is actually part of a story. They're actually saying goodbye to their management team. The first managers they had screwed them. They gave them a really bad contract, and in the end, they sold out all these records, but the guys were still poor. They didn't get their fair share of the royalties. So then that's when they said goodbye to their management team, got a new manager, and created this album. Had they used a blockchain, one of the powerful features in a blockchain is called a smart contract. And the feature of this smart contract is the code, the programming in the blockchain actually enforces the contract. When you have a physical contract with an employer, with another company, you're really trusting that both parties are going to enforce it. It's really up to both sides. Yes, we trust you. We trust that you will honor this contract. But in a smart contract, the blockchain itself enforces it. So had NSYNC used a blockchain for their contract with their management team, as soon as a customer bought their music, they would instantly get their share of the royalties. It instantly gets executed. So now, NSYNC could say bye, bye, bye to their managers and hi, hi, hi to the blockchain. Okay, voting is another area that blockchain can be used for. We saw how transparent it is with the Bitcoin's blockchain. You can see it. Well, voting is a great area, especially in corrupt countries where it's the central authority, the central government is managing the voting system, but they're corrupt. So how do you know if that voting process was legitimate or not? You don't. You kind of guess that it didn't really go through or what, but it's a corrupt country. A blockchain, had they put all the votes onto a blockchain, you have transparency into those votes. And a blockchain is really an opportunity for a corrupt country, for a corrupt government, to gain the trust back of their citizens and of their world. This is high level. It probably won't happen, but just the idea that you have that transparency and it's a way to gain the trust is very powerful. Okay, so now it's test time. See how well you've been listening. Gave you guys 5 different examples, and I want to hear it from the bankers in the room. What is the common theme in one word between all 5 different examples? Sorry, say that a bit louder.
Trust.
It's trust. That's right. That is the real innovation, and that is what we are decentralizing, trust. You can see in all 5 different examples. NSYNC doesn't have to trust their managers. They trust the blockchain. The banks don't have to trust their partners. They trust the blockchain that they're using. I, as a consumer, don't have to trust the shopping mart I'm going to. I trust the blockchain that shows the life story of that drug, and so forth. It's all about trust and shifting that trust from the people we work with and trust all day to a blockchain where you're trusting mathematics and programming. So let's look at this. In our day-to-day routine, even today, yesterday, who did you trust? Well, you trusted your bank to manage your money. You trusted your governments to manage your identity, to manage your roads. You're paying taxes. How do we trust that my money that goes to taxes is actually being used for social services? These are all opportunities. We trust our employers to honor their contracts or any other businesses we do paper contracts with, instead of storing those in like the little shelf back home, or you have that little drawer. It can all be put on a blockchain with a smart contract. And of course, we trust our grocery stores, we trust our drug stores, everywhere we get our supplies, we trust all of them. These are all opportunities. So this is a talk I did called New Kids on the Blockchain. Of course, I'm a big fan of music. And these are the faces of people leading the industry. But the key point to note here is just like the internet shifted decentralized information, took away distribution networks from companies that had the stronghold, the blockchain is going to be shifting, it's going to be decentralizing trust. And right now, it's a lot of experiments, a lot of trials. We're kind of like 1994 in the internet. Back then it was like, people didn't know, what is this internet? What is that thing, the A at the, what's that at NBC. What is that? That's where we are now with the blockchain. But this is really an opportunity. The earlier you know about this, the earlier you can get in and gain a competitive advantage. So if you're a developer, learn Ethereum. If you're a business owner or a banker, you should be asking, what is our blockchain strategy? If you're an entrepreneur or investor, there's a lot of opportunities, startups starting up right now that are getting into the blockchain space. So that's it. I say trust the blockchain. It's going to be huge. Thank you very much.
Very good, very good. I loved it.
Yeah.
I'm a teacher by trade. I love that. That was very pedagogical, as we say, step by step, lots of examples. It was excellent, wasn't it? It was really good, huh? Questions are coming in, especially towards the end, actually. Lots of questions coming in. Let's have a look. First of all, a lot of people asking whether they should invest in Bitcoin. Should they do that?
Okay. I mean, it depends. Like, it's an asset, just like gold. So should you invest? I'm not a portfolio trader or anything like that, but yeah, I mean, you've seen over the years, as blockchains get more adopted, the value of Bitcoin goes up. Just even right now, it's about $2,200 US.
Okay.
About a week ago, it was like $1,900. It's been shooting up recently, but be cautious. It could drop down.
It's like any other currency.
Yeah, and it's more volatile. It's more volatile because it's still nascent.
Right.
So, yeah.
Sophia asks, who is sitting behind the 6,000 computers?
Okay, so they're all very anonymous, but the truth is most of them are in China.
Oh.
They're like literally warehouses in China because electricity is cheap there. As you saw, the whole process is very energy intensive. You waste a lot of energy. And it creates a lot of heat. So where in the world do you have a lot of, cheap energy? China. Yeah.
Okay. What if blockchain gets hacked?
Okay, so
that's been asked, yeah? Because I kept hearing you say authenticate. I'm just thinking, maybe it's the Italian in me going, all the bloody hell is authenticating all this, eh? Who is it?
Okay, so there's different types of blockchains. I'll just stick with the Bitcoin blockchain, which is managing $30 billion worth of money. There's this one concept called a 51% attack. Remember, it's like if more than 50% of computers agree, then we update the ledger. So the only way you could really overtake that whole network is if you controlled more than 50% of the computers. But to do that, it's extremely expensive. You're going to have to spend billions and billions of dollars into processing power, more warehouses than they have in China. And once you overtake the network, then great, you steal all the money. And then what happens? Everyone loses value in Bitcoin, and then the price drops.
Right, excellent, interesting. So you it's almost like you're forcing everyone into this kind of mutual dependency.
Exactly. It's really the incentive mechanism in the system. really...
Which is really what the sharing economy is all about as well, isn't it? Isn't it an element of that as well? It's you and me, and if you're a terrible driver, I'll report you, but if I'm a terrible passenger, you'll get reported too.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly, similar concept.
So it's back to that sort of global approach. We're becoming more and more mutually dependent on one another in a way, which after all is what trust actually is, right?
Absolutely.
But let me understand, for me, sorry if this is a stupid question, but you're basically asking us to trust the code, is that right?
Yes.
Is that right?
Well, that's essentially what you're trusting. You're trusting that whoever wrote that code in the blockchain wrote it properly, because it's going to be the code that's enforcing that contract.
Okay. If it's transparent, asks Kay, why cannot users be identified?
Okay.
That's a great question, right?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, it would be great when we saw that ransomware, that we could see where that money went to. That'd be great. All you see is, we call it pseudo-anonymous, so all you see is a Bitcoin address. The question is, who's the identity behind that address? And I can tell you, like, government agencies like the IRS, they've been analyzing the blockchain like crazy, trying to find tax evaders. But, even for government, anybody remember the Silk Road? Did you ever hear of Silk Road? Over 2 years, they processed over $1 billion worth of transactions of selling illegal goods. You could go on.
This is the dark net now, right?
That was the dark net, yeah. And the dark net economy runs off of Bitcoin.
Okay.
They actually, part of the way that they found the hackers was they eventually figured out which Bitcoin address they owned and traced them back. Then they could see like every single trend. So, it's pseudo-anonymous, but if they figure out your identity, then they have a whole audit trail of you.
It's another angle to the "you can run but you cannot hide" phrase, isn't it, in a way? Yeah?
Well, right now, the thing about Bitcoin is Bitcoin was the first. We now have about 500-600 other currencies similar to Bitcoin, and each one has different features. So there's a bunch of engineers working on technologies like, it's called Zcash or Monero, and they remove that ability to see who's behind transactions. They remove that transparency, and they're obviously doing it for like the dark net.
Well, there's some things we don't want to share as well, right? It's just in us as well.
Right,
privacy is a human need, isn't it?
Exactly.
Right.
Just like that woman you came here for.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yes.
She's cute.
Okay. I hope nobody took a photo of that, otherwise it's a divorce. So what about this file storage issues? Where do we store all this stuff? There's a lot of data here we're talking about.
Yes. So it's actually the miners.
Okay.
They're the ones who are storing that data. This is actually a big problem right now in the Bitcoin space. You saw the last transaction was maybe about $60 million. There's way more transactions waiting to be processed. And a big problem right now with Bitcoin is how do we scale Bitcoin?
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with the storage. There's a maximum amount of data that can be put into a Bitcoin transaction. And so the miners, they're having an argument for the last 2 years about how do we scale it.
It's all very exciting, as you say, very nascent, right?
Absolutely.
It's growing. We're finding out about it. Previously, there was mention about we should be making mistakes as well to find out. But these are expensive mistakes if you get it wrong, right?
Yeah.
Can be, yeah?
I mean, for the people investing in Bitcoin, it can
absolutely.
be. Absolutely.
Just to finish off, a very interesting comment here from Kjetil, who says, thinking of what it actually does, shouldn't it rather be called unblockchain?
Unblockchain?
Because you're unblocking stuff, you're sort of freeing it and...
You're unblocking the bureaucracy.
Yeah. It was quite a good comment. I mean, one thing you've done for us today, really excellent, is you've unblocked the sort of mystery of it all. It's been really, really cool listening to you.
That's the
Everybody,
goal.
a big round of applause for Lorne Lantz. Really excellent.
Thank you. That was great.
Well done, yeah?
Cool. I'll grab the clicker.